You know that moment when you clean out an old drawer and suddenly find a letter or photo you didn't even remember existed? That little spark of discovery, that curiosity. What is this? Why was it hidden? Now take that feeling and multiply it by centuries, by thousands of documents, and by the power of one of the oldest institutions in the world. That's the Vatican Secret Archives. But why are they secret? What are they hiding? Are there forbidden books, ancient curses, or records of alien contact? Well, let's talk. Not like a historian or a textbook, but like two friends uncovering a story buried under years of secrecy. The kind of story most people hear whispers about, but never get the full truth. No conspiracy theories, no science fiction talk, just strange facts, overlooked truths, and some interesting realities that make this archive more fascinating than most people could ever imagine. To understand the truth from beneath, we must start the story from its real meaning. So what did the Vatican Secret Archives mean? The Vatican Secret Archives weren't always called that. The original Latin name, Archivum Secretum Vaticanum, doesn't mean secret in the way we think today. Back then, secretum meant private or personal. So technically, these were the Pope's records, not meant for public eyes. But here's the thing. When something stays locked away for over 400 years, people start asking questions. And that's when the rumors grow teeth. One of the most mind-blowing facts was how big the archive was. It stretched over 50 miles of shelving. Yeah, miles. That's more than some small countries even have roads. And these shelves weren't filled with novels or fairy tales. They had documents written by kings, emperors, scientists, and saints. Letters from Michelangelo, written during the construction of St. Peter's Basilica, and notes from Galileo's 1633 trial before the Roman Inquisition offer rare glimpses into their worlds. Even a request from Henry VIII when he wanted to divorce his wife. These papers held the fingerprints of history, but until recently, very few people ever got to see them. Getting access wasn't easy either. For many years, no regular person could just walk in and browse. Only a handful of researchers were allowed in each year, and even then, they couldn't explore freely. They had to know exactly what they wanted and request specific documents. It was like being told, there's a mountain of treasure behind a locked door, but you could only pick up one coin at a time, and only if you knew its exact size and shape. That strict control made people suspicious. And was the church hiding something more than just dusty old files? Take the case of Galileo Galilei. Everyone knows how he got in trouble with the church for supporting the idea that the earth goes around the sun. But what few people knew until recently was just how detailed and dramatic those trial records were. Inside the archives were transcripts of interrogations, the words Galileo used to defend himself, and how the church finally forced him to recant. These weren't short memos. They were deep, emotional, and filled with tension. It wasn't just science versus religion, but it was a man against a powerful system, and it all got written down and buried for centuries. And the exorcism files? Yes, those exist. The Vatican kept records of exorcisms performed across the centuries, including the guidelines for how priests should handle them. These weren't stories from Hollywood movies, but real accounts of people believed to be possessed. Whether someone believes in that kind of thing or not, reading a priest's notes on an exorcism from 1782, with full details and prayers used, gave insight into how seriously the church treated these situations. Not all of them were scary. Some were more psychological. But the fact that they were stored under such tight secrecy added a heavy weight to their existence. Then came World War II. This was one of the most controversial parts of the Vatican's archive. People wanted to know what the church did during the Holocaust. Critics believed the Vatican stayed silent or didn't do enough to stop the Nazis. Inside the archives were letters, reports, and responses from Pope Pius XII and his staff. For decades, historians begged to see these documents, but they were locked up tight. When parts were finally released, the picture was mixed. Some documents showed that the Vatican tried to protect Jews behind the scenes, while others raised questions about whether enough was done publicly. It wasn't a clean story, and that's what made it human. But what did people think about the long-lost books? People also expected the archives to contain long-lost books, banned texts, or forbidden gospels. Some even believed the church kept early Christian writings that didn't make it into the Bible. And that part was partly true. There were several early manuscripts, including letters from the early Christian community and different interpretations of Jesus' life. But were they world-shattering? Not exactly. Some were just different opinions from people centuries ago. Still, it was fascinating to see how Christianity had more debates in its early years than most people realized. One surprising thing was how the Vatican also kept records of magic and superstition. Not because they practiced it, but because they wanted to study and sometimes ban it. There were letters from bishops describing strange rituals in remote villages, reports about fortune tellers, and even lists of banned books. These reports helped the church monitor spiritual behavior and track how local customs evolved. So buried in the vaults were descriptions of ghost sightings, pagan ceremonies, and even love potions, and all observed by church officials. There were also personal letters between popes and world leaders, some full of warmth and kindness, others tense and political. For example, in the 12th century, Pope Alexander III advised King Louis VII of France to avoid war with England, urging diplomacy instead. Another where a queen apologized for a past sin and asked for forgiveness. These letters weren't just historical, but they were emotional. Reading them felt like stepping into the shoes of rulers, each trying to navigate power and faith. And what was the strange thing about them? One strange but true document was the papal bull excommunicating Martin Luther. It was there, officially declaring him an outlaw from the Catholic Church. It wasn't just a piece of paper. It was the spark that helped ignite the Protestant Reformation. And it sat quietly in a file, sealed and stored for centuries. This was history that shaped the world, hidden in a box. Security around the archives had always been serious. Guards protected it day and night, not just because of the contents, but also the symbolism. This wasn't just a storage room. It was sacred ground, a memory bank of spiritual and political power. Every detail, every old envelope, carried weight. One of the most impressive things about the archive was its organization. Despite being centuries old, it was well preserved. Temperature-controlled rooms, detailed indexes, and specific categorization kept the information safe. No modern scanner could read everything inside. Some documents were handwritten in Latin, others in languages no longer spoken. Decoding them required not just language skills, but also a deep understanding of history. When Pope Francis announced in 2020 that more of the archives from Pope Pius XII's time would be open to scholars, it made headlines around the world. It was a turning point. Slowly, the Vatican was showing it was willing to open the doors, even if just a little. Researchers rushed in, eager to find truth, not treasure. Some hoped to prove their theories, others just wanted clarity. Either way, the veil began to lift. No aliens, no time machines, just something more powerful. Truth. Truth about power, decisions, fear, love, and belief. Not all of it made the church look good, but all of it made the church look real. And that honesty was more shocking than any myth. So what made the Vatican Secret Archives truly special? The thing that made the Vatican Secret Archives truly special wasn't just what they held, but how it was, how they reminded us that history wasn't clean or perfect. It was messy, emotional, controversial, and beautiful. Popes cried, kings begged, scientists argued, and regular people made their voices heard in letters that somehow survived centuries. The Vatican didn't need to hide dark secrets to be interesting. Its archives were interesting because they showed a church not frozen in time, but one that developed, struggled, debated, and carried the burden of preserving human history through faith and flaws alike. Beyond religion, the archives captured moments that shaped nations, treaties, royal correspondence, and diplomatic negotiations that impacted world politics. It was a spot where theology and authority came together with handwritten ink-shaped margins. It was once difficult for anyone outside the community to get inside the archives, but nowadays, more scholars are being allowed in. It meant the church opened up, allowing new findings that showed how its past fit into the broader account of history. It turned out that the Vatican Secret Archives didn't hold anything risky. It was platforming for stories that the world had not given a space to before now. And when those stories were published, they did not break people's beliefs. They deepened them. Because the truth, even when messy, always brings us closer to understanding. And sometimes what's hidden isn't buried because it's forbidden, but because it's waiting for the right moment to be found. Rather than being silent, these archives required great patience. History, in other words, has its course, not one dictated by anyone else. The Vatican Archives didn't hide monsters, but they hid the truth about power, belief, and doubt. And maybe that's the most dangerous thing of all. Since everything today is supposed to be quick and instant, the Vatican Archives help us realize that some things are best appreciated gradually. And sometimes, the greatest learning happens in silence, not when everyone is talking.